afternoon to everyone, and thanks for coming out. I'm going to take a few seconds to read a little bit about the panelists. The first one would be Mr. Tony Dofat. Has worked side by side with Bad Boys founder Sean Combs in various capacities, including sound engineer, arranger, mixer, and composer of music. He was an original member of the production unit, The Hitmen. Mr. Dofat is an author, lecturer, and professor here at Long Island University in the Media, Arts, and Audio Technology Department. His introduction to music came by the way of playing the trumpet at the age of 9 years old. Lastly, the Mount Vernon Public Library Association and the Westchester County legislators proclaimed August 19th the official Tony Dofat Day for the Mount Vernon, Westchester County, New York, Mount Vernon, Westchester County in New York. Yes, Mr. Dofat is a native of Mount Vernon, and yes, he has been around the world. Next is Mr. Dustin, who's joining us from Panama. Holds a degree in information systems and is an IBM blockchain foundation developer and a certified Microsoft educator. Dustin has over 5 years of cryptocurrency experience and is founder of the CaymanCoin. Dustin is also the creator of the Atlas operating system, which can be used to carry out cryptocurrency transactions. Dustin is a technology educator and has introduced grade school students to information technology, coding, and cryptocurrency mining. Next up is Mr. Jesse Grushack, holds a dual degree in computer science and economics from Union College, is co-founder of Ujo Music and co-creator of the Ethereal Summit. Jesse has spoken at conferences and events around the world, including South by Southwest, the Golden Melody Awards in Taiwan, Blockchain Valley in Switzerland, and more. This is Daniel.
My name is Daniel Matalon. My experience in media includes co-founding one of the internet's first online television networks called iDiscovery TV. I'm involved in several projects right now with Dustin, including the founding of what will be one of the largest mining facilities in the world, a distributed facility. I'm here to kind of augment some of what Dustin will be talking about, and as a music panel, that's not an area that I have experience in, but will be augmenting from my media experience. I'm also an impact investor, so I look for projects that not only are profitable, but support sustainable development goals as outlined by the United Nations.
Okay, so some of my questions will be in general for the panel to take, and then some will be specifically to individuals on the panel based on their background. So my first question is to the panel in general. What was the impetus that moved you into the blockchain framework? You guys are doing it anyway.
Well, I'm going to speak on that first. The first thing is smart contracts. Being paid as a composer and as a writer. When you're in the music industry, a lot of money exchange hands, probably $8 billion last year in revenue, and a lot of hit songwriters are not getting paid. They're not getting paid because people are overlooking a lot of things. There are disputes, publishing issues. Probably a normal song would consist of 2 composers, maybe 1. Now, in 2018, we have songs with probably 18 different composers. So when you're dealing with split sheets with 18 composers, and someone has to pay it, and someone samples that song, meaning that you use that song, that pre-existing song, and put it in a new composition, now we have 18 songs that were 18 writers that were pre-existing, and then we have to add new writers to it. So money is getting lost, a lot of money. And I'm dealing with that now. I'm going through my catalog. I have 2 catalogs, 2 huge catalogs totaling 172 compositions. There are probably 5 songs in one of my catalogs that I have not received royalties on in over 10 years. So that is one of the things that encouraged me to actually take a step and approach to doing this.
For me, it was a little bit different. I found blockchain in 2010 and mined Bitcoin for a couple days, had 2/100ths of a penny, and thought it was the dumbest thing that anyone's ever done. I had a really slow computer and no money, so I was like, why would anyone use this? And I think it was about a year later when Bitcoin started breaking $1, and I started realizing, I was like, why does this have value? Because I looked at it a year ago and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And then it started making me question, why money, like the US dollar, has value. And then I started to see why this technology was really powerful. Fast forward a few years, when I graduated school, I went into the music industry because the blockchain industry didn't exist yet. There was no panels, there were no conferences, there were hardly any companies. Most of them were Bitcoin mining companies. So I went into the music industry. I had a passion for music. I was working for a live events company, SFX Entertainment, working on technology at our live events, and specifically cashless payments at live events, so using RFID wristbands for buying beers or food at a festival. And I couldn't get it out of my head that blockchain would be a better solution than the one we had. It was the data, the internet issues, kind of a lot of the problems that we would have using the technology at our live events. I was like, well, this would just be way more efficient on a blockchain. And then I left there at the end of 2014 and found myself, trying to find something impactful. I found a company called Consensus in the beginning of 2015, and they had just started to think about, music and how that existed in blockchain. And so I jumped on board, and for me it was quite the opposite side of music, the recorded side versus the live side. So it was, it's been a tremendous learning opportunity as well. But once you start to look at it, and once I was sitting in the rooms with publishers, and I remember sitting in a publisher's office and him going, I was like, yeah, but don't you have issues with some of your accounting and identifying music and where it goes? And he's like, yeah, we get checks every single day for money, $5, $10, $20, $100. We don't know where it's from. We don't know who it's for. It's really just not worth our time to figure it out.
Fascinating.
And, I looked at him and I was like, wait, really? I was like, but it's got to add up. And he's like, oh yeah, it does. And 2 years later, we can cash it out because, you keep it for that long. And I could feel Tony heating up over here because he's like, it's my fucking money, right? And that was the issue. And
That's a technical term.
Right.
Just for a second, can you explain to the audience, for those who may not know, when the guy says, okay, it's been a few years, we just go ahead and cash it out. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think they have to keep that money available, I guess, for 2 years or so before they're allowed to do anything with it. And so if someone comes and says to them, hey, you owe me $100 for this song, they go, oh yeah, we got that check back, and then here it is. Then after the 2 years, and Tony, maybe you can have clarity to this.
Yep. The thing is that you have to keep track of your stuff. If you do one album, you have 10 songs, great. It's easy to look after, but in my case, I have 172. And I have 2 split catalogs between 2 different huge publishers. So now I had to sit down and spend hours, countless hours, putting together my spreadsheet of every song I own, my stake in the song, all the co-writers, their codes for BMI, ASCAP, or their PRO codes, and their publishers. And now we're going over, my lawyer and I, and a lot of money fell through the cracks, over 6 figures. But I'm going to get it back, of course, because I'm doing the right thing. And it took years for me to do this because I kept putting it off. And like you said, they don't pay you. It's the music industry. You only get paid if you ask for money. Even if they know they have the money and they owe you, they'll still sit there like, I'm waiting for him to ask. And you don't get paid until you ask, even if you sign a contract, unless it's a smart contract now.
Okay, moving to Dustin, what brought you into the blockchain ecosystem framework?
Can you hear Dustin?
Can you hear us?
We can't hear
to the mic.
I'm sorry, I heard that, but I couldn't.
Don't use the
remember.
microphone, just talk.
What was that?
To the screen, he'll hear you.
Talk to the mic is in front of the.
Dustin, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now,
The
thanks.
question on the table is, what brought you into the blockchain framework?
That's a good question. I've been interested in Bitcoin from the day it came out. I thought it was an incredible piece of technology. I thought it was the future. I remember watching movies, and in these sci-fi movies, we'd hear people talk about credits, and when Bitcoin came out, I said, you know what, that's the credits that they're talking about in these science fiction movies. But then, as I got into it, started to look at the technology behind Bitcoin, and which is the blockchain, as we know, and that just, it was just so impressive, and there were so many things that could be done with it that I even started teaching kids how to mine on the blockchain, Bitcoin using Raspberry Pis, and I created an operating system around that just to get them into it, which is based on Linux. But it's just incredible what the number of solutions that the blockchain can provide to so many different areas, whether it's music or farming or payments or contracts or intellectual property rights. So it's disruptive it's disruptive nature is what got me into it. I really, really like it.
Okay, next, Dan.
Much of my work in the blockchain is in investing in projects or helping develop and mentor them. So I was at the blockchain conference in 2013 in San Jose. Met the Winklevoss twins when they were first coming out with their fund. I'm one of those people you hear sad stories of who lost access to a significant amount of cryptocurrency. I have been fascinated with equating wealth building with agreement on a conceptual level. And so the blockchain is really a digital expression of that. I don't think any wealth changes in society without agreement. It's not a question of how hard you work or your talent or what kind of start you got in life if it doesn't result in expanding your relationships. And I think one of the things that we often skip in trying to understand this technology, which is something I referred to last night, is understanding that all of this is about restructuring our relationships. That's really what we're talking about, moving from centralization to decentralization. I think it's really more about distributed power than it is centralized power. And that's essentially not only what you're trying to do in democratizing the music and media industry, but throughout society.
You mentioned that you lost some dollars. What made you keep the faith and stay in the game?
After I got off the floor, I was out of it for a number of years. And slowly, I got drawn back into it just as part of people bringing me projects to invest in. Dustin and I are working on a pretty significant one right now.
This question is for Jesse. Can you say a little bit about what is Ujo Music and the purpose of Ethereum?
Yeah, sure. We started Ujo Music 3 years ago with the goal of making blockchain and music work together. No specific focus at first. Kind of has developed into what looks like a Bandcamp right now, which is a direct way for artists to sell music to their fans. We do a couple different things in there. We also pay 100% of the royalties to artists, so we're not taking a cut at all right now with anything we're doing. And we're also trying to really embrace the artist-to-fan relationship, because to us that's the most important thing, and it's what we've really lost with digital music. If I asked anyone in this room, what's the last album you were listening to, you probably have to pull up your phone. Is that me? You probably have to pull up your phone, look in your Spotify or Apple Music or whatever it is, and figure out what the last album you listened to was. It's not that tangible CD you used to hold or the record or whatever. We've really lost that connection to music. It's become much more of a passive experience. At least in our opinion. So right now we have a platform for artists to go on to register their music. and to sell it for a price that they set. And, that's kind of a core piece of infrastructure that will help power, a new economy in the music industry, kind of the way we're looking at it. And Ethereal has nothing to do with Ujo, really, other than, we looked at the space and my background in live events. And we realized that, there's a lot of these conferences, there's, people talking about this stuff, but I think, this is a great example today, of bringing the community into it. But that was something that was missing, when we first started this 2 years ago, was that we were doing blockchain conferences with blockchain people, and we were doing, these conferences about changing the world with people that are on the forefront of their technologies. And how do you bring these two groups together so that the people that are really pushing the limits in their field that might not know they need blockchain technology or might not even need it at all, but how do we put them together in the room so that they can be getting the knowledge and the information and potentially a solution to some of the hardest problems. And so that was kind of the concept behind Ethereal, was bringing together the culture, the art, music behind in the world, and how do we infuse that with crypto and support all of this stuff and really make a more creative future.
Now, is that now an annual event?
It is an annual event in New York. It's in May. Last year we did it at the Knockdown Center in Queens. It was a 2-day event, and we've done smaller ones kind of depending on, last year we did San Francisco. Next year we have plans to do San Francisco again and London, so, but we will be in New York in May.
This is for Tony. Do the artists you work with know and understand the benefits of putting their work on a chain? What do you explain to them about the chain to make it more digestible and agreeable to them?
Oh yes, of course they know. After I explain it to them, they get so excited and like, let's do it. Because every artist we go through the same issues. And after you've been around the industry like myself for 26 years, you see the same things happen over and over again for 26 years. And my story, I was very fortunate and lucky, but there are a lot of artists that are not as lucky and fortunate as myself. I have a legal team, a lot of people don't. A lot of artists and songwriters from the 60s and 70s have huge copyrights, and they cannot collect money on it properly. So yeah, I think it's going to change a lot of things. It's going to bring hope back to a lot of great writers and composers, because it leaves a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths, not wanting to stay in the music industry. They're like, oh no, I had to leave because it was just too much. It's very stressful. It's one of the most stressful careers and that exist. So, and the most stressful part is not the creating part, but it's collecting your revenue. Once we solve that, then I think we're going to have much better music.
Dustin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about what's CaymanCoin?
Okay, so CaymanCoin is centered around blockchain solutions. Whether it's music or government, healthcare, supply chains, and so on. So that's the main purpose of CaymanCoin, especially in the Caribbean, where we'll find that there's a lack of, I'm getting a bit of an echo, I think it's from the mic in front. Yeah, especially in the Caribbean, where there's the record keeping seems to be a little, it could use a lot of work. I think that's everywhere actually, but by setting it off in the Caribbean, you have these smaller sort of sandbox and test beds that you can work with in order to accomplish what you set out to do, which is, using the blockchain for record keeping, for provenance. It could be something as simple as mango jam. There's so many people that might be involved in the process of creating this jam that you're going to sell in the supermarket. Even if it's just a mom and pop project, there's the guy that plants the seeds, there's a guy that picks the mangoes, there's a guy that cleans the mangoes, there's a guy that squeezes the juice. So by using the blockchain, every one of those people that are involved in the process to make this final product, you have a provenance and a record that in order that everyone can get, get paid where they need to. And just like the music industry, this issue with, artists and the intellectual property rights and not being able to, receive their fair and just rewards. This is something the blockchain will definitely solve. So CaymanCoin is centered around providing blockchain solutions for the different industries.
Okay, this is
Specifically in the Caribbean.
this is I guess for Daniel. From what I understand, you are VC. Okay, and you're working with Dustin.
Yes.
Can you explain to the audience the nature of your relationship or how that works?
Sure. It's kind of an occupational hazard that when a project will come to us for investment, that a lot of times they're not ready for investment. And so just in the process of giving feedback to a project, letting them know what is going to be necessary for them to be investable, we're already starting to shape that project, right? Which we'll certainly be doing post-investment as well. So we got into looking at the mining space through a project that Dustin was looking to do on a pretty significant scale. It interested us because they've done some things with cooling costs, which are really essential for profitability within the mining space. And that was of casual interest to us, but what we really began to look at, and some of this was driven by some of my own experience in media, is that and I think it's essential if we're talking about blockchain technology solutions that we really look at where it started from, because unless you really understand what drives cryptocurrency itself, I don't think you can really grab onto what blockchain is about, right? That's where its origins are. And as we began to look at that, we said, if mining is going to be something significantly profitable for early investors, and I think we're still at a very early stage of that, I know a lot of people don't feel that way, we're going to have more adoption. And that means we're going to have buy-in from people that are not at this conference. We're going to have to get it out to the audience, because I think one of the things with your last, Gene, with those set of questions we had, between crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, all of that, media is built on content, platform, and audience. I don't care what kind of media it is, it's got to be that three-layer cake. And so one of the interesting things in talking about, sure, the artists all love this because they're going to get paid, but how are we going to bring the audience to the table? So one of the things that we're looking to do with what started off as solely a mining project is for significant funds have been set aside to do this, to popularize cryptocurrency as a space to John Q. Public. Right? Somebody's got to stand up, and I'm sure that's exactly what you guys are doing with a lot of what you're doing as well, and say, how do you get it out to the people who have not adopted it yet? What's going to get that buy-in? Because all currencies are driven up by adoption, right? Nobody wants the Iraqi currency compared to the British pound, right? Because there's just not enough buy-in to the Iraqi currency, right? It's going to be the same thing in cryptocurrency individual ones, but it's also on the space as a whole. So with respect to our collaboration, it's essentially not only dollar capital, but it's also strategy capital, if you will, and then ultimately human capital on top of that. Does that?
How did you guys meet?
It's an interesting story. So Dustin is also a partner in a new exchange in Panama, where I'm doing some work in Panama. And I literally was just bumping into a friend of mine in the crypto space, part of a company called Crypto Capital, which is an unsung hero in the crypto world and is probably doing more to facilitate transfers between the fiat world and the crypto world, which is our second biggest challenge behind audience participation. If money was made in the crypto world rather than having to be transferred into it, and you made some reference to transfers, how difficult that is manually to take things that are offline transactions and bring them into the blockchain. we would solve a lot of our issues, right? And people are actually earning money in the crypto space. And so crypto capital is pretty essential to that effort, and I'm very close with some of the principals there. And during the launch of the Panda Exchange in Panama, we met that night and met the from there.
This is for Jesse. What kind of opportunities do you feel are in the blockchain environment for non-developers?
Yeah, I think there's as many opportunities in the blockchain space as there are in, you know, any space. Obviously, it has a very technical, you know, aspect to it. It's starting to somewhat change a little bit. I think it needs to change a lot more. I think, you know, this technology needs to blend into the background. I was actually, you know, with someone, and they were asking me, you know, like, why does a Tesla have the ability to go faster? And I started to break down, you know, like how an electric engine works and how a gas engine works. And then I was like, what the hell am I doing, right? And then I thought about it, I was like, I do this every time, or people do this every time you ask them what blockchain is, and no one cares, right? No one cares how the engine works for the most part. They just want to get in the car and drive. And I think once we get past that point where we're stopping to sitting around explaining how blockchain works and just explaining the benefits of it and how you can use it and how you don't need a 30-character string to send money. You just send it to, you know, a person's like email address or something, like how the web works. You know, that's when it's going to start to really be available.
If I can tag into that, when I hear people talking about how it works, my response is, let's talk about why it works.
Right.
Let's talk about what we're trying to do with it.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, I think, and we're getting to that point. It's starting to get to that point where we're bringing in a lot of non-technologists. I think, you know, we need to make it even easier to use, and it's getting there slowly. You know, we'd like it all to move faster than it is, but it is getting there. And, you know, I think there's going to be as many opportunities, especially in the music space, because, you know, your job's not going to go away. And I think that's one of the most important things. Artists are still going to want managers. You know, Tony's sitting here talking about how he has an entire legal team. Maybe you'd have half the legal team if it was all blockchain, but he'd still need a lawyer, one or two, right? Sure. You wouldn't need any accountants, but you know, there's pieces of it, and you know, he's not going to want to. And all artists aren't going to want to sit there and register their music and do all of the business behind it, right? So that piece is still going to need to be there. Labels still provide marketing, they still provide services, and so all of those pieces are still going to need to be there. It's just kind of the substrate that you're transacting on is going to be a little different, and it's going to be easier, I think, you know, if we get to do it right.
I guess I'm curious, the annual conference that you're involved in, what kind of people are there? Is it all developers? Is it marketeers? Is it people that do user interface?
I think it was 30% developers last time. 60% non-tech, so and then like 10% like kind of in between. So yeah, you know, we're really trying to cater to the non-developers, to the people that everyone needs to know how or why this technology is important, but not everyone needs to know how, right? So I think that's, you know, one of the biggest things.
Right. If I could just expand on some of what Jesse said as well. What I did was, while we were talking about that, and he was talking about, you know, we don't need to see the back end, we just need to see it work. So I'm just going to share my screen for a second. And this is what a smart contract might look like on the blockchain. And as you can see, we've got, it's for Kayla, who's who's working with Tony, and this is for her song Carnival Day. And we've entered all this stuff, and it looks quite complicated. But in the future, it may look like something like this, right? So you don't have to get into the whole back end of it. So this is something that CaymanCoin is working on as well. So just as Jesse said, we don't need to see all of the complicated stuff behind it. We just need to know that it works. And when we go from a smart contract that looks like this on the blockchain to the interface that looks like this, that's when we're going to get a lot of adoption.
And I think if I can throw this out, I think the question we have to really be asking ourselves is, why should the audience care? I know why the artist does. I know why the producer does. But if I've already got my Spotify and I'm getting my music, if you got this startup thing over there, what's going to cause me to move from this to this so that the audience, so that the artist and the artist ecosystem is going to be able to survive? Because if the audience doesn't show up, it's not going to happen. And that's the complication we have to get over. We have two things we have to address. One is the education, and the other is the user experience has to be so seamless and so easy. You know, we're all looking for the killer app for any kind of technology to be adopted, and I'm sure we're not there yet, because I'm not really sure we're really asking the question of what's in it for the audience.
Will the audience have to pay more
Make it
for?
more affordable. We have money, we can afford it now. Like, we don't need accountants, we don't need to go through the same measures, so we can make it affordable. And everyone would jump on it.
If it's going to cost less or they have some other financial benefit, I would agree with that. And that's probably what, you know, now that you say that, is what we ought to really be leading with, is that this is not only an economical thing for the producer, it's an economical thing for the
We
consumer.
win everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think, you know, we look at this, right now, music, it's a great deal. It's $10 a month. I get access to every song on the planet, and it's awesome, right? I can, you know, type, hey Siri, play whatever, and she will. Except if I want to listen to Jay-Z, right? Because Jay-Z's only on Tidal now. So now if I want to listen to Jay-Z, I either have to have it on my iTunes, or I have to have Tidal also. So now I'm paying $20 a month for music. Now what happens if a couple other artists do this, you know, some of the bigger ones, and I want to listen to them? Now we're paying $30 a month, $40 a month for music, and that's, you know, 4 or 5 times what we ever used to pay for music. The average consumer used to spend $80 a year on music. Now we're spending $120. But guess who's getting screwed? The artist, right? And so how do we get it back to the point where, you know, we can spend less on music, but the artist gets more? And that's those direct relationships. That's what this all starts to, you know, materialize, is these direct connections where, you know, an artist will happily take 2 pennies for a play because they're getting the 2 cents, right? They're not getting 2/100ths of the 2 cents. And that's where the issue starts to become.
This is a open question to the panel. Do you guys know of any traditional record labels or music companies that are forbidding their artists from using blockchain or investigating blockchain?
Well, just from my recollection, if you're signed directly to a label exclusively, you really have no choice. You're stuck into that contract. There are a few indies that are investigating it now, but as far as any major artist signed to a major label, I highly doubt it. You're stuck with the old system. Yeah.
Yes, you know, I think that's spot on. I think some of the major labels are starting to look at this technology. When we went to them 2 years ago, they looked at us like we had 6 heads, and now they're calling us back and being like, oh, can you guys come in and talk to us? And we're like, sure. You know, we go in and talk to them, and they have an idea, and their idea doesn't make sense, and, you know, we work through them with their idea, and then they realize, well, wait a second, you know, we need other companies to be involved, not just us, because we don't want to pay for some democratic platform to be built if it's not going to benefit only us. So, you know, we need, if we're, you know, Warner, we need Sony and Universal to get on board also, but they need to pay us extra because, you know, they're not us. So that's like kind of the situation I think we're in now, is like a deep trying to understand out of the record labels, which is great. But, you know, I still would think we're a little bit off from them totally going, you know, feet first in the pool.
But is there any possibility that because they have deep pockets, they can jump into it quicker and get things up and running quicker for their artists?
Possibly. I mean, you know, I think no matter how deep your pockets are, there's only a certain amount of people that actually really understand this technology and understand how to build it. And like about 1,000 of them work at Consensus, so we're doing our best to choke that talent. But you know, I think, yeah, it's you know, I don't know that money is the.
To keep it honest, I think labels will try to stay away from this, major labels, because they cannot hide money anymore, and things will become transparent. And they love the buffer right now. They love the buffer. They love when you call and their assistant says they're out to lunch. So That's how they hide a lot of money.
Yeah, I would say 100%.
And they like control.
The money and control, and until you can go to them and say, hey, look, this song that you made $1,000 on, well, we could have made 50 on it if you went through our platform. That's the only day they jump ship.
I guess going forward, I'm sorry, how will the purchasing of digital assets shift as more assets are put on the blockchain? And just take a minute and tell me how would you describe what a digital asset is?
Any piece of content is a digital asset. I mean, whether you monetize it in a way that we recognize right now, or it might be used in some other aspect of transaction, anything that you have that can be shared, observed, transferred, becomes a fact. It goes from an idea to a piece of paper. It now exists. If I pass away, my generations can look at it 100 years from now. It's now in existence. That's become a digital asset. So from an intellectual property standpoint, sometimes those assets are internally used. Sometimes they're not consumed on the outside. But it becomes essentially what we used to think of as physical once it has a capability of being shared. I mean, if that's the kind of definition that you're looking for, whether we monetize it or not.
I'm looking to hear 4 different definitions, actually, not one particular definition.
Yeah, his definition was pretty dead on. I would equate that to a copyright with the song. It's something that you don't really see, but it has value.
Yeah, we're kind of looking at digital assets, even to actually like making them not physical but like tangible, and so we're using what are called non-fungible tokens, or unique digital collectibles. So essentially, every single item is unique. So like I could buy, let's say Tony comes on Ujo, and I could buy Tony's badge number 1, right? And I could signify that I'm his first fan. And so what he can do with that is, right now, not much, but theoretically, if he said, I want to build a whole fan club around this badge model, he could do that because these badges are on Ethereum, they're public, they're, accessible by anyone. And he could say, you know what, the first 10 badges that have bought, you guys get access to my shows for free forever, right? And now that is a asset that I own, a digital asset that I own, that gives me essentially a free guest list pass, right? It's a golden ticket to any of Tony's shows. And then I could say, Tony does something, I'm like, you know what, screw this guy, I hate him, I never want to go to a show ever again, I want to sell this. I sell it for, Tony's really hot, I could sell it for like 100 grand or something, and Tony goes, yeah, sure, but you have to give me 50%, right? And so I'm going to take 50% of that sale, you get $50,000 more than you ever had before because you were supporting me early on, but now that's an entirely new revenue source that we've never even thought of to open up for artists, right? And it's transparent, it's not replicable, so no one can just say, hey, I do have the golden ticket. Tony's like, no, you don't, it's not on the chain. And that's where it starts to get really interesting, these new interesting revenue opportunities with these digital assets that we can create that have never necessarily existed before, can't be duplicated, can't be replicated. And so now we're looking at stuff that, and that's like one of the goals of Ujo, is how do we find these new revenue opportunities? Because streaming's a race to the bottom. It really is a race to the bottom. And Apple can afford to lose as much money as they want on streaming. Amazon can afford the same, Google can afford the same, Spotify loses $1.3 million a day, and I don't get it. So where does this shift, and how does it shift? And in our opinion, it shifts in creating these relationships, creating new revenue opportunities, and pathways for artists to make money that might not be directly related to their music, but it is part of their brand and part of their, who they are as in the public eye.
You mind asking Dustin the same question?
Dustin, you want to hit us with your answer?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about that. For the case of ReggaeCoin, and it sort of touches on what I think Jesse was talking about with Ujo. With ReggaeCoin, you're building a relationship between the fan and the artist. So by having a digital token that's connected to this digital asset that's, deployed through the blockchain to have the transparency and everything, as a fan who's helping, say we have an up-and-coming artist and you're a fan of this artist and you want to see them go big, by you sharing their music, by you talking about them and posting on Twitter and posting on Facebook or whatever, Instagram, whatever social media that person chooses to spread the word of this new artist, perhaps they could get something in return. Maybe they could get tokens like ReggaeCoins in return for promoting this new reggae artist. So all of a sudden, not only is the artist making money, but so is the fan. I mean, when have you ever heard of a fan being able to make something, even if it's not money, or it could be concert tickets or free passes or T-shirts or anything like that. This sort of it bridges this gap between the artists and their listeners and their fans and stuff like that. So it's just moving forward. We have to develop these things, and I think by the use of digital assets and the blockchain, we can develop relationships, truer relationships between the fans and the artists themselves. Because right now it's just like, I'm a fan and there's the artist and there's this gap between us. So we can decrease the gap between the artist and the fan. It becomes a much more dynamic relationship.
What's so fascinating about that, Dustin, and with all these other definitions, is it also addresses the problem of information discovery, right? We've got such a glut in every field, but especially in media, where it's very difficult for an artist, with all of its accessibility to the whole world essentially in front of you, it is also accessible to every other artist out there too. And by putting those kind of incentives where the fan has a stake in the outcome of what happens with an artist, depending on their leadership of the rest of the fan base, you're shifting a lot of the marketing dollars that also have an opportunity to be disintermediated in this and put it into the hands of the audience themselves and giving them a financial stake in that, or maybe a reward stake or whatever kind of
whatever
stake.
it is, right? I think to answer the point before of like how do we get that audience, that's out, right? We incentivize them with whether it's monetary or access or content. We incentivize fans to use these platforms because there is a chicken and egg problem. You can't have artists without fans, and you can't have fans without artists, right?
Exactly.
So, way we're looking at it as well is, can you put your music on Ujo and have it go everywhere, right? Go to Spotify, go to Apple Music. So you're not restricting your fan base, but you could say to them, hey, if you really care about my music, come buy a badge, come buy, my album on Ujo, because I get to keep 100% of that. Or even if I get to keep 30% more than I do from iTunes, which, would be the case if they had a label already. That's something. That's something better than exists today. And it's not gonna happen, overnight. And if it did happen overnight, probably there's really no blockchain that could genuinely handle like the trillions of transactions that happen in the music industry right now. So I hope it doesn't happen overnight because everything would break and everything would be turned off forever. But it's gonna get there, and it's gonna be a slow grassroots kind of approach, and it will get to that point, where we can power a new music economy that doesn't just take cuts of the artist's revenue, because the artist is aware of what it is, right? They're aware and they're transparent, and it fosters creativity.
As it stands now with Ujo, do you charge the same price to a known artist as a up-and-coming artist?
We're not charging anything. So, we actually had someone, when we did our second kind of case study with RAC, someone reached out to us and they were like, I've been emailing you guys for months, like, do you only talk to Grammy Award-winning artists? And I was just like, it's a way better marketing style with a Grammy Award-winning artist than it is without them. But we basically, looking at it, now it's like we care about all artists of all sizes, and we're not going to be able to bring you a fan base necessarily yet. But being part of something early has its benefits. If you look at Imogen, she, talk about this more. She sold her song on Ujo, or like a platform we built for her in 2015. Every song was to download or to stream the song was 60 cents, and at that time, one ether was worth 60 cents. She made about 135 ether from that, and didn't sell it till December of last year. So she ended up making like $75,000 off of 130 copies because she was willing to take that risk and adopt early.
Are you referring to Mycela?
No, this was on Ujo. So the Mycelia project kind of came out of what we did with her, with Ujo. And so, you know, she basically said she wants to build this, she wants to be totally free and everything, and, you know, went on her journey and now is on a world tour and used the money she made through the Ujo experiment to help fund that project, and, you know, really excited for her and excited to see what happens.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience now for Q&A.
I have a question. At what point do you think that the artists are going to cross that threshold that takes them over to blockchain and instead of this current, the current industry, and how things are set up now?
I mean, I think it's you know, willing to experiment, right? And we're not asking artists to cut their fan base off by going, you know, exclusively on Ujo or, you know, any other blockchain music platform. We're just saying, here's another place, right? And you might not make $1 off it, you might make $5 off it, but this is what we see as the future, and, you know, come play with us and experiment with us, and, you know, it could really pay off. But when does that turning point happen that every artist feels the need to be on blockchain? I think when we get to that point, they won't know that they're using it.
I think after one major artist becomes successful, and I think knowledge and awareness would persuade a ton of artists. Because when you think about how much more money you can make in the accuracy of your revenue, that would persuade a lot of people, because you own a song, and let's say, for example, I'm just going to continue to use this same Nightmare song. All right, I own a song with 18 other co-writers, and someone else wants to use it. So how difficult would that become to grant a compulsory license? They would have to, or to license that song, they would have to contact 18 publishers. And when it comes to those type of songs, when it comes to film making the synchronization license, they usually tend to walk away from that. I just got a call from Fox 2 weeks ago to license one of my songs, and I didn't get back to her fast enough, and she used someone else's song. And the reason being is because my particular composition had 9 writers and 9 publishers. So let's say if they could go online and just license that song instantly with synchronization license or through a blockchain, it would have happened, and I would have made my share of that song, from that song. And it was on a huge show on Fox. So it happens a lot of times. If I don't get back fast enough to some of these clearing departments, I lose a sync license right there instantly. So, and these are some of my favorite songs that I usually grant licenses annually. I have maybe 3 or 4 that are very popular, and every year I grant license for MTV, VH1, Fox, and everywhere. But I think once they see those situations, and once they're aware, they become knowledgeable about these situations, then they would definitely jump toward it, I believe.
Right. If I could just expand on that as well a little bit. In the case of reggae music, for example, you have, say, guys in Jamaica that will create a dub, and then you'll have a bunch of artists use that particular dub, or what was known as a rhythm. So you'll have, like, say, the Tony Dofat rhythm, and then you'll have Shaggy or Daniel Matalon or Buju Banton want to use that rhythm. Now, to ensure that Tony gets paid because he's the creator of that rhythm, you know, you could release it on something like ReggaeCoin and through the blockchain. Every time that's used, he's getting his just rewards for that. Now reggae is particularly popular in Asia. So you'll find a lot of reggae music, it's making money in Asia versus the United States. So how can we keep you know, all those people that are involved in the creation of that dub, that all these different artists are using, you know, that they're reciprocated for their efforts. So I think what might drive musicians over to ensuring that the music or their genuine content is created on the blockchain is those musicians that are inside. I mean, let's take Kenyatta, for example. If he's got a wicked riff on the trumpet or something like that, and people are sampling it and using that into like rap music or hip hop music or whatever type of music, he may, you know, he may want to have rights to the work that he created. And so the driving force might be from within, might be the, you know, the smaller people within the industry that are getting the bigger artists involved in it, and then maybe that's what creates the critical masses that artists want to, you know, move forward so that everybody's happy.
That's your question?
Yeah. We have time for one more? We have time for one more? Anyone else have a question out there? Sure.
You guys are involved in creating a Bitcoin mining operation. So I was actually doing a little bit of thinking on that, I guess a few months back, and you know, obviously the best place to create it would be someplace that has a lot of sunshine. The weather
Cheap
is
energy.
cool, you know, so that it's a cool place like in North Dakota or someplace like that, and also have good bandwidth.
Sure.
But are you guys creating it in the West Indies? And if you are creating it in the West Indies, is it underground, or is it because as you go lower in the ground, the temperature stays pretty stable? So are you guys doing it in the West Indies? I'm West Indian, I guess,
As Dustin is, yes.
I'm curious about that.
So let me first of all, if you don't mind, just to broaden the question, since you brought it up a little outside of our topic here, to say that the energy costs are the single most significant issue in mining. There's a lot of debate about that. There's a lot of interests that want to paint the story that miners are going to use so much energy they're going to be like a plague on the earth. And of course, if you compare to the actual carbon footprint that's related to producing gold, you'll actually see that it's significantly less within cryptocurrency. And that's not even before we start to drive the innovations like some of the ones that Dustin's company is doing to lower those costs. So in our case, with what we're doing with them, we're going to have a distributed model of portable data centers that are going to be all over the planet. They're going to be 120 portable data centers is essentially what they are. So wherever we're going to be able to find the cheapest energy costs is where we're going to be.
Solar panels, and what about like solar panels, but also there are areas that are cooler longer?
That's right. You'll see a lot of mining operations that are happening in Irkutsk and places, you know, up in the Arctic and so on. So there's not only, you know, solar, which also has some challenges with storage, of course. There's also hydropower. And we're going to deploy some of these actually out on the water, not only on land. Water real estate is an emerging field of law that I think has a lot of relevance to the crypto ecosystem, because if you want to create a new society, a new country, which there are serious, significant efforts going on, you only need access to a physical place, and there's some on the planet that are not owned by any country, and you need the ability to create a money system. Where would we find that? So in terms of their efforts, it's really based on where they can find the best energy costs. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Right. And also, in terms of that, because of the energy use, you find that the crypto mining industry, or blockchain transaction mining industry, will probably be the driving force in new types of, or more efficient types of alternative energy because of the energy use involved, and the fact that we don't want to create a bigger carbon footprint that's out there already. But the point to mining as well is not just about mining cryptocurrency for a profit. The blockchain depends on miners. So if we need to get to the state where the blockchain is able to process millions and millions and millions of transactions per second in order to facilitate even what we're trying to do with the music industry and blockchain, mining is a very essential part of that.
Mining is kind of like the settlement system, the Visa and MasterCard settlement bureau of the blockchain economy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, we're working on immersion cooling, and some of the servers are being designed to use a lot less energy. And some of the places that the servers are used for mining, they're now using that to sort of heat some buildings. Like I'm from the Caribbean, but I went to Canada, and the first thing I saw was a lot of snow, white people, right? So, I mean, it was a joke, I was 12 years old, so the thing is that we thought we could eat the snow, right? We thought it was flako. So the thing is that a lot of people and on the technical side are looking at how they can make the servers more, like less energy being burned and they're more effective. So you'll see that happening within that. Now, the next one thing I want to ask about the music is because, like if you have a system where when you make the music and like there's 18, like the gentleman was saying, 18 different people composing. Because every time I pick up a song that Drake did that song, tell me why. That's Eric Carter did that song, but he was able to pick it up because a lot of samples, even 10 seconds of a sample. So if all those songs can be blockchain through a system, automatically the settlements and the guy would already see there in advance, and it will already be done. So, it's just a matter of just taking a lot of that stuff and being able to put it in a way that they have the settlements put together and track every piece of part of the song. Like they're taking diamonds and minerals right now and being able to blockchain each piece as it comes out to do the audit trail on everything. So, and then not only that too, but I think when the musician makes his music, there's some code that he can put inside the music that we may not be able to hear, but automatically will be mutable based on the song coming through, It's like when they were kids in high school, they would play Pink Floyd or a song backwards, and you start hearing another song. Or you had songs that was you're listening, and if you listen closely, there was another song buried below that had the coding. Because only, you look at animals, they can hear tones at a higher level, and we can hear tones at a certain level. So those can be buried in the system that the computers of the system can pick up and automatically blockchain a smart contract that right away.
Okay.
Absolutely correct, yes. Some of that code could actually be colors because, when you look at the colors in the computer and the 256 colors, when the computer says that 256 colors, that's actually a tremendous amount of colors. So you can actually code a frequency within that sample as a marker that actually reflects the color. So I love where you're going with that.
One quick point.
We gotta wrap it up, sir.
This is Bauhaus theorem. Because I think Bauhaus theorem had a lot of that stuff implemented, and that goes back almost 150 years. Sorry.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Let's thank our panel, please.
Thank you.